that might help. Let's see it. Okay, so as ever with any Doug meeting, there's an opportunity for our. You've come off mute again, Martin.
Don't touch anything, Martin. I've muted you.
Okay. So as ever with Doug meetings, we start with a cage rattling session. I suggest what we do, given our stopping at noon for a minute to observe the silence. I suggest that we have a quick go around to see what people want to discuss. Then we have our minute silence, and then we discuss them afterwards, if that makes sense to everybody else. And we'll nudge back a little bit my vision statement for the next year. So have anybody got anything they want to offer for us to chat about in the cage rattling session?
There's Steve Pins here, Whitbread. The only thing I'd be interested in is I know myself and you and Gary have been talking about a lot of stuff for the future, but it'd be really great to get a little bit of an overview of coming soon or things in the pipeline or that sort of thing. That would be fantastic.
Okay. Cool. Well, that will fit in somewhat with the next session after the cage rattler, where I'm going to give you an update of where we're at with thinking about the vision and those sorts of elements. All already on the agenda.
Tim, I've got one, I suppose.
Go for it.
So we do some demand modelling of grocery principally, and we've been doing that sort of very usefully because Tim Raines is on the approved researchers scheme. We've been doing that with living cost and food survey data, which is great. But you do, certainly when I looked at it, you do realise how much variation there is out there. But it sort of chimes with something that David Spiegelhalter said earlier about taking a confidence interval and doubling it, because what we're also doing now is working more with spending data from banking cards, from payment card products. So instead of having sort of with LCF a sample of 5,000 or 6,000, I guess, households, we're now going to 2.5 million individuals, which presents its own problems. But what is coming through loud and clear is the range, if you like, of per household or per capita spending is so much broader than what you see in the LCF.
Right.
And I think it's just, for me, it's a real eye opener that small, well balanced sort of surveys are great, but they are very different from what's going on really in local areas. And that's my cage rattler, I suppose.
No, fascinating. I'm sure we could. That will, unless anybody else has got anything else to offer, I'm sure that can take up the 10 minutes that's been allocated, sort of thing. Are there any other? It fits very nicely with what David was saying about that analysis of the R rate, doesn't it? And different sources, different assumptions just end up being different. Yeah, you may not have come up, but there's an organisation I've started to look at. It's called the London Mathematics Laboratory, which sounds very dull, but one of their lines of research is how do we measure and understand model uncertainty, and even how to just take account of the fact that actually models vary and we have different layers of confidence.
Do you know what I observe? So you talk about data literacy. So when you have a low bar in terms of data literacy, when you start using things like confidence intervals and plus or minus, it's perceived as a weakness.
Yeah.
It's not perceived as a strength.
Yeah.
And they want a pinpoint thing, and actually the fact that there isn't one is kind of ignored, but it's seen as a weakness that you can't deliver that.
and often people come to data because they think they're going to be given some certainty, and
Yeah.
actually educating the data just doesn't deliver that. It makes you aware even more of how uncertain things are often.
Yeah.
And then hopefully gives you tools to navigate that.
Yes.
But, we'll come back. So my clock is now on 59. So when it clicks over to 12, I'll allow us all to have that minute of contemplation about this last year. I think if you heard on the news, people were asked to observe that minute silence, as it's a year since the first lockdown was announced. That television program that Boris told everybody to sit in. Sorry?
Midday.
Yes. So I will be quiet now and leave us with a minute to ponder our own thoughts about this year. I think that's a minute, according to my clock. I'm sure many of us have had a very different journey through the year. Some of us at different times, but it's not been one any of us anticipated. But I'm sure. So let's move back to the cage rattlers, and we'll spend a few moments first talking about demand modeling in particular, but particularly like Ian said, this blissful ignorance, if you like, when you look at just one data set, and as soon as you try and get two data sets, you're suddenly getting two different stories rather than a corroboration of the other one. And I don't know what experience others have. I've seen that many times myself, but any thoughts before I ramble on? I guess one of the things that we have to do with that, and David and Ian indicated it somewhat, is that actually you've got to be very careful when you present it, that actually the people who are less data literate, if you like, don't suddenly throw up their hands and think that the whole thing is just not worthwhile at all. And but it also, I was talking to someone the other day. It was about this idea of a single source of truth, if you like, which is a very common ideal for businesses to develop, and I think there's a great benefit operationally to having an agreed source of truth at any one time, but I think analysts sometimes do need to step back from that and look at the alternative viewpoint. So it may be in the KPIs that get analysed. We know different KPIs, whilst attempting to measure the same thing, will show something different. It was in one of the coffee chats we were having. And, sorry, yes, Matt.
No, I agree with you. I struggle with this thing where we often have dry exercises to cover the business, well, a complete set of KPIs that they just measure and they see every week.
Yeah.
Actually, for me, it depends on what's happening. And how,
Yeah.
and as the context changes, I need to look at it in a different way, which may generate a new way of a new measure that I may need. But until that happens, and almost trying to, one thing we're doing, putting a new process where the data doesn't exist and stuff, and trying to abstractly create a pack without the data, without a story. It's so hard for me. And as soon as I got the data, then I can start to build it and see what happens. But there's this feeling that, yeah, you can do all these things without having an objective or a story. You just got to monitor loads of KPIs, which are often dry.
Yeah, and I guess I'm in terms of shifting things from Ian's first presentation, which was 2 different data sources to 2 different KPIs, but they're sort of similar in that I think one of the things you have to do first is make a comparison with what's in your new viewpoint with what measuring the old thing. And as you all know, my wife's not is quite ill at the moment, and we had a similar thing a couple of months ago. One of the measures she'd been using in the hospital for her health was measured using an old method, and they decided to update the methods, but it turned out this method of measuring ostensibly the same thing, it was some levels of thyroxine in her blood at the time, actually quadrupled the amount of measurement that it said. So we got no sense. Even a simple thing like measuring a chemical in the blood required us to go back and make some assessment, because actually the ongoing time series was properly disrupted on quite a critical measure of where she was, and I think that happens in all sorts of contexts, especially if you move, and it is very difficult for people, data who are less literate. That
web data is a bit like that.
Yes,
especially when you do upgrades and things, and then people don't even realize it, right? And so then people are starting to build models off the old data and say, well, it's all going to change. Time you get the model live, so what's the point?
And one of the challenges with admin data is that new definitions get applied to the data. They get forgotten in the dim and distant past. You then build models on that admin data that go across those redefinitions, and you end up, that redefinition can cause a quite significant impact around a particular date when someone might have forgotten the changes in definitions. And then
I've had that problem with mergers and acquisitions, that we're moving one of the brands onto a completely new system, and therefore the platform, the definition even of a bet or a bonus is all going to be different. But they expect you to have these predictive models ready before you even got thinking, and it's a nightmare trying to juggle that expectation.
Ian, I'm realizing that
Sorry.
You introduced this idea and I haven't given you much time to say anything.
No, I suppose my reflection on it is with things like, with organisations like ONS, which are the bedrock certainly for us of so much that we do, and with the year in COVID has proved that nationally as well. Where should they be going to achieve scale, but still a level of simplicity? Maybe on some things like household spending.
Right.
I don't know the answer really, except that there's probably something to be done with payment card information from banks and tying that back to retailers' EPOS systems, because all you really need is a location and a timestamp, and you can go fishing for the receipt, can't you?
That's right. That's right.
So it's a question. It's what I suppose rattled my cage is that what we have isn't sufficient.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess Lorraine, could you put yourself on mute? I think you've got some background noise which is popping.
I think that was my fault. She can't unmute herself, so I've left her.
Oh, I see. Right. No. There
I've
you go.
muted it. Lorraine, can you just mention in the chat if you want to contribute, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I was just saying that I know ONS themselves are trying to facilitate using some of the organizational data sets, aren't they, for things like KPIs and the retail prices index and the like. And the retail prices index itself is one of those ways in which things have been redefined. I'm conscious now of us keeping to the time scale. So is there anything else that people want to mention around the Cage Rattler at this point? Cool. We'll move on to answer hopefully Steve Binns's question about some of the things that's come up. The next section is on the Doug's vision for the coming year and its goals. And as I was explaining just as you came on, just as I was getting prepared, I've realized that when I wrote my conference event slides, I overwrote my vision slides, and so I'm going to have to wing some of it. But let me share the slides, and hopefully my structure of my talk was sufficiently controlled that we'll get there in the end. Here we are. So let's just go to the vision for 2021. Okay. It was quite a what's the word? Chastening point when in preparing for this section, I looked at what the presentation we had for Doug Vision and Goals for 2020, which of course was done when we were up in Birmingham on January the 16th, and I was looking at it and thinking, I think at that point there was a vague rumor that something was happening in Wuhan, and certainly I don't think it crept into our conversation about what we might achieve in 2020. Much of it we didn't manage to do, but and certainly some of the things have progressed a lot slower than we'd have liked, but we have made some progress. So I laid out my thoughts, and the way I was going to structure the Doug Vision for 2021 was using that often used phrase, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. And I had a picture of a hand with some rings on it because as I say, it comes from a wedding, and I partly use that because I want to start with this emphasis on people, and as David said in this morning, that narrative and that context of numbers is a vital thing. We've already really illustrated that today with that discussion about demand modeling. In knowing what to bring behind the scenes is a vital element. As I say, my next slides have disappeared, so I'll just talk to you from memory, and I'll reconstruct them so they can get.
I've got them in Dropbox if you want me to.
I think I've overwritten it.
Do yours or shall I do mine?
Try it, but as I say, you might have the same problem that I've got.
I've got the rings that you were talking about.
Oh right, okay. There you go.
Bear with me.
Yeah.
This is such a fun day, isn't it? It's driving me nuts.
Oh, there we are. Yes.
There you go. So, right.
Thank you.
Where do you want me to scroll?
So if you want to put it on the slide, if you put it to slideshow, and then we'll.
Hang on. I've lost it. It's up there, isn't it? Right.
Excellent. So if you move along one, as I say, so if we move to the next slide now, we'll. So there's something I particularly wanted to remind ourselves, if you like, of the legacy that we have, that I really want to build upon, and the first one is the three legs that we've always talked about how that involvement that Keith brought together of us engaging with government, As the very first reason for Doug starting was to enable the census to be made open back in 2001, and that's led us on in a legacy of developing relationships with the government, with academia through the Consumer Data Research Centre, and bringing us together as end users, and not engaging so much with the data suppliers. We've had this phrase of data skills and connections for a couple of years as the things we are going to try and aim to develop with each other. And one of the things that's come up, I think it was Ian last year during a meeting that said that one of the things we always used to have, let's say it was before my time anyways, was this sense that we were campaigning for something. We were campaigning particularly for access to more data and new data. And it's thrilling actually to hear that at Sainsbury's in particular, you're now able to use the Secure Data Lab as an approved researcher, because that, if you like, was Keith's last bit of legacy, to actually enable the powers that be, particularly academia, to accept that, believe it or not, commercial organisations are capable and actually are essential in working for the public good. And he's enabled us, so it's good to see us being able to use it. So that element of campaigning, I know some people have asked for me to try and make sure it stays part of it. So I chose a picture of Gandhi there because it was a quote which is, the legacy is not so much what you leave for people, what you leave in people. And I hope, as I say, we can, as Doug together, can inspire the ways that we approach different things. So that's the legacy that we want to maintain. So if you can move to the next slide, Jan, something new. The something new element is a refinement of where we were last year, but I've got to give Gary acknowledgement of where we've moved what last year we called the Doug Sandbox. This is the idea that all the open data that we are getting and gaining access to. So at the moment, Doug members each have to do that hard work of bringing it together separately and alternatively. And what I hope we can do as Doug together is create a data access point for open data in particular, where we can all contribute and use it for it. And Gary has come up with this vision for us developing the most comprehensive, connected and open data source so that we can all use it in an accessible way. That vision has grown somewhat as an ambition, and to make it a core part of why people would want to join, that they get access to this extra data source without them having to reproduce it themselves. And so we've now got a technical infrastructure where that can sit in a cluster to be provided. I'm keen for members to identify particular sources that are particularly useful to them as an open data source. I know I've talked, it's a while back now, with Mark in particular at GfK about introducing the open data from NHS Digital, which is clearly very, very relevant to Mark's context, but also I've seen has lots of crossover into other areas as well that we have. So that's certainly going to be a focus in the short term. And as we mentioned last year, this is the area where we also think we might be able to get some external sponsorship. And that's one of those other new things, to try and give ourselves a bit more financial stability through sponsorship. Something you won't be aware of yet, but consistent with that new data, is I've made an application to the ICO around, they've put in a bid for research funding around how we can help facilitate third-party data exchange. Because at the moment, whilst the ICO recognise its value, they are not finding any good way of people compliantly exchanging data. And if we can help crack that, again, it will be a source of a hub where people can come. Because as I've mentioned, whilst GDPR forces us in a lot of organizations to just look at first party data that has a number of risks when it comes to analysis, because you only see what's happening within the organization and don't give yourself a baseline for happening. Then the apprentice support has moved along. Predominantly the main development of that is actually by myself now having 3 different apprenticee. Why is an apprenticee? I mentor 3 different apprentices, and I've now will have experience of 3 of the different levels. So the data analyst level 4, the degree level, and the MSc level of data analytics. And what's clear to me, and where I think Doug can help, and I'm keen to do that, is that what are called off-the-job activities as part of their 20% of time. And that's one of the things that can certainly come out of the coffee chats that we do every week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If apprentices join those, they're definitely part of what can fit in their portfolio, and definitely we focus a lot on the softer sides rather than the technical sides of the job, and they're the bits that are often missing out of the university elements. The other element that I want to try and develop is just support for the mentors within the organizations. At the moment, they're left with very little support. The universities don't seem to give them much support, and there isn't a great provision for finance in the way the monies are spent at the minute. And of course, the last thing we really must concentrate on, and I value any support anybody else can give, is just on us finding some new members within Doug, as it's been raised. In order for us to contribute connections, we can build things with government and with academia, but the most valuable connections are with others in the commercial family, particularly from different sectors, and that just needs some more volume for it to work. So there's something new is really important. There's something, if you can move on to the next slide. With that, I don't want to minimize the things that we can borrow from others. And as I've already mentioned, the Office of Statistics Regulation and the Code of Practice for Statistics that David Spiegelhalter referenced is going to be core to the way we help develop. And I always remember Martin's discussion of how the great thing about a code of practice, and the great thing about it being voluntary and unenforceable, is it makes it flexible, but requires this court of your own peers to check against. So I remember, I think it was Mark during the discussion talked about the ability for us to discuss how we present things with each other, and that can give us a place where we can look. We can develop as well the data that's within the research centre. And I always think that the work on disclosure control and anonymisation is a valuable tool that comes out of ONS, and is key in particular to how we can exchange third-party data. And so if we can move on to the fourth, something blue slide, Jan. Thank you very much. What might be quite interesting for you to know is that the blue, and we've done it as well, blue is the most common colour used in corporate logos. And one of the reasons, it is seen as the colour which has got the most variety of different interpretations as well. But core to us, I think, is this, and then one of the reasons for it happening with government logos, company logos, is it's meant to be something that's trustworthy and reliable. And as I know others have referenced, but Honora O'Neill talks about the thing that we can do first in developing trust is to ourselves be trustworthy, and that's one of the things that we can hopefully help develop through our association with Doug. What we can also do, I think, is help develop commitment. One of the real problems at the moment, I think, within data science in particular, is this sense that people move around a lot, and that they focus on the techniques and getting someone that's highly skilled. What underneath has been recognised now is this problem between people understanding their own agendas and what they're going to achieve with their own careers, and aligning that with what is the corporate agenda and how they need it. And there's a big, easily a disconnect between what the individual needs to do to develop their careers and what an organisation needs. It's the agent principle problem, I think, in economics it's called. And I think what hopefully we can do is actually enable people to stay in the same place and yet develop from contact with the outside. And that staying in the same place has a value in that we begin to understand the context better on which the data turns, and it helps us build the relationships within the organizations that help us to interpret things in a way better for them. And last but no means least, I hope what we can also do is help develop that passion and drive that we all can have and share for the enthusiasm for doing data, bashing up against people who are less interested, less literate, need hard work to get the interpretations right, and sometimes, as I say, use the cage rattling sessions to let off steam, if you like, almost. And as a result of letting off steam, then hopefully do our jobs better when we go back into our businesses. So I hope, as I say, underneath we have people who are passionately designed to campaign to get access to new data that's outside the organization, that enables us to communicate better what's going on within our organizations. If you can go to the last slide, Jan. So that, as I say, our vision is then together to help us build better data, better skills, and especially with new members to have improved connections. And I've probably gone over my time. Hopefully that's gives you a sense of where we're hoping to go. Are there any questions?
Yeah, in terms of the Doug Sandbox, is that
Yeah.
something that you're looking for a lot more feedback from the Doug members? That's what I'm hearing. More feedback from the Doug members as to what kinds of data would be quite useful.
Absolutely, yes.
And I guess that's kind of a challenge in itself, because I guess we don't know necessarily everything that's out there. So there's a chance that that's going to be a bit of a slow burner, isn't it? Whilst we sort of do some investigating and find stuff out. But this is all about having the capability, isn't it?
Yes,
I was going to add in
having the capability. Sorry, someone else was.
Yeah, Tim. I was just going to add in that part of that I'll aim to do some of the legwork and actually give the options of and Steve, this is building on from our chat last week, because actually I'd love to take it further and then offer that kind of innovation kind of an awards, who does what with it, in that kind of sense. But certainly from a legwork perspective of the options of data, that's the bit that I'll be doing. So, and I'll bring it back to the group.
And I guess as well, what I should have added in, there's something new, is actually having Gary alongside us, trying to particularly focus on the if you like, the business development elements. And
you're only putting in relevant or good points though, Tim, so I see why that was left out.
So my own strategy at the moment, Steve, is that we start with the open data that we know of, if you like, and to begin to have the infrastructure, and then hopefully that'll flush out other people who think actually it'd be really helpful if I can have that linked together, as I mentioned with Mark's focus on medical data. And if there's anything else that others come across, there may be specific things related to hospitality, for example, that if you spot them and can then throw them to us. But I would also just throw us things that you'd like, and we can, in that process, look to see if there's examples of it. So I'm saying don't restrict yourselves at the minute just to the possible. Tell us what you'd like, and we can keep our eyes out then.
All right. Okay. We'll have to get our brains around that one, but we'll have to think.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Because I'm conscious that we've now got Peter as well, bringing us right back to our legacy of and what could we do elsewhere on the 2 days after Census Day than have someone from ONS talk to us about the census. That it really is taking Doug back to its heart. I haven't seen Peter's spotlight coming up yet. Oh, there is Peter. Yes. Over to you, Jan, if you can bring Peter in. Thanks very much for joining us, Peter. You say you've been a long and erstwhile servant of keeping us together. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, can I just check the sound? Not done WebEx before. All sorted. Brilliant. So it's good to be here and good to see a few familiar names and faces, but also quite a few of you that I haven't met before. But I have been working with you in Doug for almost 20 years and you know, was part of making sure that the outputs from 2011 absolutely met your needs, free at the point of use, and we've appreciated all of your support as well over the years. By our reckoning, in our business case, let me just shut my other laptop up. It's pinging at me. Excuse me. I have to go on a separate laptop for things like this because ONS security shuts it all down. But by our reckoning, in our business case, the commercial sector gets something like £3 billion worth of benefit from the census statistics in relation to where you put your superstores, what you put on your shelves. I think now potentially even where you close your stores, but also understanding markets for banking, etc., etc., etc. You can do better than me explaining all the value. So it's been good over the years to develop all of that understanding with you. So for those who don't know me, I've been working on the census and other things in ONS for 20 years. Before that, did 10 years in the NHS, and more recently, as well as being responsible for the census operation, which is obviously running at the moment, also responsible for our business surveys and our social surveys. And thank you to all of you who fill those in, whether from a business perspective or for you as individuals. So what I was going to cover today, I've done no slides because, as you can imagine, I'm in the throes of running the census, but I didn't want to miss the chance to talk to all of you. So I'm going to talk a bit about how the census is going, a bit about the broader stuff that ONS is doing, a bit about census outputs, albeit it's a very snippet there, so I'm not involved in that side of things, but they've got consultation on the way. And then a bit about whether you might be able to help us a bit more with the census. And then I've suggested to Jan that we stop recording at that point and we can have a slightly freer conversation about some of the details. So far, so good on the census. We're getting a really good response. The online system was fantastic. I hope those of you that went online found it so, but we were seeing it from a different perspective. We were watching the back end, watching people come online. And as literally millions of people went online on Census Day, the way we'd managed to fine tune it, all hosted in Google Cloud, nothing slowed down for anybody. And we could even watch the peaks come and go as news items came and went, as I went on the One Show, which was a nice thing to be able to do, as the adverts played, particularly Gogglebox. And if anyone saw Gogglebox, they talked about the Census Day, and you could see at the back end the spikes of response. So we've now passed Census Day, we've got a fabulous response, and we're now onboarding our 30-odd thousand field staff bit by bit who start knocking on doors and also sending reminder letters to those who haven't done it. And one of my focus points at the moment is making sure we send reminder letters to those that need them, but don't send them to those that have done it and we're going to annoy them. But nonetheless, there'll be some who've done it, get a reminder letter, and our call centre will deal with all of that. So I'll happily talk a bit more about the ins and outs of running the census just a bit later on. For you as users, obviously, getting good quality results is absolutely fundamental. And there's a couple of times over the last few months, we've worked with you to seek your support in helping us with the census publicity. I think Ian Diamond probably spoke about it at the Doug conference. Ian Diamond has since written to the chief execs of a number of large retailers asking for help with the operation. I'm amongst friends who I've known for 20 years, and I'm going to say I'm slightly disappointed in the response that we've had in asking you for help. And that may well be my fault and our fault for not making it clear enough what we were after. That said, I'll tell you some of the fabulous things that people like you have done. So we ended up with 18 strategic partners supporting us. They've been, some of them, sending stuff via social media to internal staff only. Others have done it via social media to their customers. Others have actually put stuff in their stores. So The Premier League, English Football League, Welsh Rugby Union have all done a whole bunch of promotion. The Association of Convenience Stores and a whole bunch of partners of there have done a bunch of stuff. Roland's Pharmacies have stuck little stickers on every prescription package to saying census is coming. Please fill it in. Metro Bank, Barclays, Find My Past, Transport for Greater Manchester gave us all of their outdoor advertising, and I actually went to Manchester a couple of weeks ago and saw the adverts on bus stops that they've done for us. BT have lit the BT Tower up purple on Census Day. Royal Mail are putting a frank on letters, so you might see a census franking on your letter. And the Post Office have put stuff in stores. Boots have done some great stuff. The Wales Millennium Centre, HSBC, Waitrose have done stuff in store and in magazines, Mumsnet. It's been great, really, really nice. What I would like to ask from any of you is whether you think there might be scope for you to do one of three things going forward and to talk with your PR teams about this. So the first is simply a message to your internal staff that says, this is how we use the census. It's really, really important to us. Emphasize that you never get individual records, it's just statistics. Make sure you've done it. Make sure you tell your friends and family if they haven't done it. So put that message out internally. If you'd be willing to go a step further and put a message out on your Twitter feeds or your web pages that says, census has happened, we use the census with a little snippet to make sure we get superstores in the right place, making sure you say we never get the detailed data, but putting something out to customers that way, or even putting something in your stores. And as we get towards the back end of the census, we are constantly managing the local hotspots where response rates are a bit lower. We may even come to some of you and say, can we stand outside your store with a member of ONS field force who's able there to give advice and even to do a completion with somebody there kind of on the doorstep outside the store. So if there may be just some local hotspots where we might want to do that. So if any of you think you know your PR teams well enough, you can point them to the letter that came from Surrey and Diamond a few weeks ago, and you can, offer whatever assistance you like to. If you want to do that, you can email Bruce McIntosh at ONS, or you can email me directly and I'll pass that on. But offers of help, really gratefully received. Just if you look on Twitter, there is stacks on there at the moment, and just simple stuff that to customers that says census really matters for planning our services. Please fill it in. Then we'd be really grateful for that. So then, if I just more broadly talk about what's going on in ONS at the moment. So I'm responsible for our business and social surveys as well as the census. When the coronavirus kicked off, I was pulled off the census for 3 months to set up a thing called the COVID-19 infection survey. I don't know whether any of you have seen any of that, but what we're doing there is randomly selecting about 150,000 people a fortnight, and they are sampled once a week for a month, and then once a month for a year. They're tested with a PCR test to see if they've currently got COVID, and then once a month they have an antibody test. And that has let us measure the level of the infection in society over the last year, pretty much, 9 months now probably. And it's been, because it's a random selection of households, even if they've got no symptoms, it gives a more accurate picture. So if you're interested in that, it's fascinating, in my opinion, outside of work, just to see the trends. They're incredible. You can just search COVID-19 infection survey, ONS, and you'll find that. But there's something even more fascinating starting to come through. If you follow that latest bulletin down, there's a link to the analysis of antibodies taken by blood tests. And that, about a month ago, started to show the best news I've seen, because as you test people for antibodies, what you start to pick up is the people who've had the vaccine. And what you now see is, in the crude figures, 75% of over 85-year-olds, over 80-year-olds, I think, have now got antibodies through a blood test through that survey. And because that's a random sample, that's generalizable for the whole population. And when we model the trend, potentially that's now nudging over 90%. And in the general population, regardless of age, it's now hit 35%. Some of that is people with antibodies because they've had COVID, of course, and some of it is people who've had their jab, or like me, hopefully having their jab tomorrow, having turned 51.
There's a margin of error though, Peter. You have to remember that. And double it.
51.
Sorry.
So that's great, and it's worth having a look at that. But then finally back to census, we've just done an output geography consultation. I think the results of that have been published, and we are kind of, I think, steady as you go. I've not been in touch with the team. I've just kind of had a quick read through some of it myself, and I think the conclusion of that was we'll continue to maintain the output areas. I think it looks like there's some discussion about also publishing statistics for grid squares. Not quite sure where that's going, but there will now be a future consultation on the detail of the outputs that will run from spring to summer. And watch out on our website, you'll see that, and I'm sure somebody will be dropping Tim an email when that comes along. But that's then consulting on, we've set the questions, now what detail do you want, and that's all coming up. So I think that is my broad summary of how things are going. If you want to ask any general questions while the camera is running, please do. But if you want to get into detail, then we'll stop recording and talk about some more of the detail of what's going on.
Peter, I was just going to compliment you on the COVID survey. I've followed that with fascination it's the thing that I've trusted, if you like, as a good benchmark of what's going on overall. So I thought it was a fantastic contribution from.
Yeah, and I can tell you a bit of the story about how that came about in a little while.
Okay.
Will we pause the recording now?
Yeah, and for, if you like, carrying on that Doug tradition, the legacy is that it started with census, and hopefully it'll complete. And I wonder, when will you publish the admin test data alongside the actual census? Do you know, or will that just be used for internal use?
I don't know for sure, Tim. I don't know for sure. We'll certainly publish a comparison of some sort. Whether we'll publish the individual files, I don't know, but I know that in itself would be of use to you. So, and we're keen to get as much value as we can, as soon as we can. And of course, knowing that things will be changing post-pandemic as we come out of it, even over the years, not just the months. We know that updates of where people are living, where people are working, how people are traveling are going to continue to be important year in, year out. So we can chart the change that's coming after the pandemic. And those alternative sources are going to be critical to that work. So there'll be stuff published for sure. How much detail, we'll wait and see.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Good to see you all. And if anybody feels like you can give us a hand, then drop me a line and we'll keep talking with you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All the best, Peter.
Cheers. Bye.
So I'm conscious, I don't want to keep anybody from their lunch.
Can I just say, the detail that we talked about on return rates, keep that amongst yourselves, please. But not,
of course, yes.
Yeah,
by all means. No, we appreciate you sharing it, and it's amongst friends.
Lovely. Cheers. Thanks. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. So with that, I'll say I don't want to keep anybody from their lunch. I'll summarize. We've had. I hope you agree. We've had some great content. What's usually the case is that I can personally thank Jan and now Gary for getting us in the right place at the right time and take a little bit of credit for the content. However, this time I have to actually give Jan and Gary the credit for the content too. They've, as I mentioned, my responsibilities are somewhat elsewhere quite a lot of the time at the moment. So I really, really appreciate them keeping the show on the road in my sometimes absence.
Can I just say, we've created a members only section on the website,
yeah,
which this video of the meeting, our meeting, will be uploaded, and you'll be given the access code for that. And then we'll put more content on as we get it that will be a members only content.
And Jan, will that be available to other people within our organisations?
Yeah, we are the member organisations are members of Doug, so you can circulate it within your organisation.
Right. Okay. It's just we're trying to add someone to this members only bit of the call as well, a new interested party, and we weren't able to join the party, unfortunately. So
it was WebEx doing what WebEx has been doing most of the day. I can only apologise. I've been trying to follow it up with emails and I can't get him in.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Thank you.
Brilliant. So thank you very much. I'll look forward to seeing some of you again on our coffee chats on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 4 o'clock, and then we'll recommence our cage rattling sessions at the beginning of the month, and look forward to the next meeting. Thank you for joining us all.